Sweet.
I telegramming you the new link.
Sweet. Awesome. Yeah, just telegram it all to me if that's cool.
Hey guys, sorry. We changed stream settings, so we both have the he has channel affiliation for stream. I have the stream key. I forgot it would change my camera settings. My bad.
Yeah, people asking who that is, that's me without a beard. I just wanted to make it clear to everybody on social media yesterday,
One of the
just because.
funniest things on a comment, dude, was Dave looks younger than Camden now, and I was like, LOL, you're right.
That's funny. I'm just well, someone goes, you look like a 24-year-old now, and it's like, you're not
Thanks.
off.
Yeah,
Yeah, you're
yeah.
not off. um yeah, a lot of people are saying they miss the beard, and I get that. I really do.
I
Just,
mean, it's just of a used to at this point type thing.
yeah, I'm just gonna tweet that out that we're live. And
Yeah, we'll wait a couple minutes. We got
yeah, well, let's
27 of them, but so smooth.
um hold on one second. Let me just put this on the thing, and then
Did you save the hair as a memory, Dave? Did you?
no, actually, I got some funny pictures. Um
Did you?
I
Oh,
did
you had
this.
to shave it in funny shapes on the way, didn't you?
I did the
Yes, absolutely.
handlebars. I did the whole thing. Yeah, I got some pictures. It's pretty funny. Hold on a second here, guys. Just let some more people get in the stream, and then we will jump into it. Hold on here very quickly. Boom. All right. So, how's everybody doing today? Yeah, it is the best part of shaving a big beard. You get to have fun with it. Yeah,
I
exactly.
know, right? They look like
Exactly,
kids.
exactly. Yeah, exactly. Right. Precisely.
Anita
Hold on.
Spencer, we are kids.
We are technically speaking, yeah, it's he's not wrong. Okay, so here's what we're gonna do. So, all right, we got about 30 people in here. We could probably get started. Um, so yeah, as let's see here. We'll start like that. Perfect. So today, everybody, we are going to be focusing on a few different things. As you see in the title, Alternative 3, the Pleiadians Mark of the Beast, warning message, and of course, the one and only person himself, George Soros. So without further ado, let's jump right into it. So we're going to cover first and foremost sort of like I figured we'll do something like a public episode intro type thing in terms of covering the different sources. Let's look at the mainstream media or the mainstream definition or understanding of alternative 3, and then this page that Camden has open here right now is a fantastic expose, just like the one from a few weeks ago regarding the Nazis and all that. So Alternative 3, and I'm not trying to confuse anyone here, we're going to go through each definition carefully. According to Wikipedia, in this case, is a television program broadcast once only in the United Kingdom, only once in 1977. It was then later broadcast in Australia, Canada, and New Zealand as a fictional hoax. Allegedly a hair or a tribute to Orson Welles' radio production of War of the Worlds, purporting to be an investigation into the UK's contemporary brain drain. Alternative 3 uncovered a plan to make the moon and Mars habitable in the event of climate change and a terminal environmental catastrophe on Earth. The program was originally meant to be broadcast on April Fool's Day 1977. While its broadcast was delayed until June 20th, the credits explicitly date the film to April the 1st. Alternative 3 ended with credits for the actors involved in the production and featured interviews with a fictitious American astronaut. Now, if we jump over to the actual expose of the secret space program Alternative 3, is there a clandestine space program designed to save the elite from a global catastrophe? I think there's more than one. Doesn't always have to be a government plan, but that's not necessarily the sort of the premise of what we're looking at here. Let's go one by one and see what Alternative 3 was. Now, before we do that, what I want to do as well is I want to jump to the next tab. the WordPress Paranoia Magazine website there. And right below the science report picture of the alternative three showing here, what we'll see here is that someone says, and again, not a mainstream media outlet, if you want to call it that, but I think this person put it together so well. What is so dangerous about alternative three is that in essence, it presents a kind of grand unified conspiracy theory, the glue and missing link for so many of the conspiracies we puzzle over today. And the premise is so elegantly rational and simplistic. When alternative three is involved, a lot of things go quote unquote missing, including people, but there's going to be more on that later on. Now we see here, again, take a look at this. Originally, it was to be broadcast as an April Fool's joke on April 1st, as we saw on Wikipedia, right? But due to various events, including a scheduling mistake and a strike, the episode wasn't shown until June 1977. According to David Ambrose and Christopher Miles, they had been approached to film the Alternative 3 final episode as a spoof. The problem was that by retaining the format of the original Hard Science series, as well as hiring Tim Brinton, a well-known presenter and host, the presentation came off as authentic. Interestingly enough, what we're going to see here is that if we scroll down a little bit more, we'll see right above the subtitle, the premise. A very important piece of evidence, this is a very important piece of evidence in television. Much of the money you make is off syndication rights and film rights. Okay, now I wanted to just point that one sentence up before we continue here. So we see the public reacted quickly and vocally, a couple paragraphs up, and all parties involved in the production of the film went on to stellar careers. Christopher Miles went to direct a series of well-received films and all that. David Ambrose pursued a career in writing. Tim Brinton became a member of parliament, and Brian Eno is now a household name in the world of ambient and electronic music. Interestingly enough, again, first and foremost, let me point out how these people were quote unquote taken care of simply for appearing in this show. And putting the alien thing aside, let's just look at the nuts and bolts angle of it. Let's reference John Stockwell, former CIA agent who said that all the time the CIA would pay a writer, the CIA, to say, and again, this has nothing to do ET related. So let's make that affiliation right off the bat. Go, write what you want in this book, but for these particular perspectives, quote unquote, that you hold, you're going to say this, because we're telling you to and we're paying you to. Now, here's interesting as well. Here's what's interesting. Another interesting fact needs airing. To my knowledge, there's no available master copy of the film. Purportedly, all master copies were destroyed in a fire, and all contracts and legal documents pertaining to Alternative 3 have been lost. The only original in existence is a film copy that Christopher Miles kept as a personal memento of the production, but as far as the actual TV company or station that owned the rights to it, the show does not exist. Interestingly enough, what we're going to see here, if we scroll down even more, we'll see Alternative 1. We'll also see Alternative 2 and then number 3. I'm not going to read through all of it, but Alternative 1 was to use a series of nuclear devices to attempt to blow a hole in the upper atmosphere to vent pollutants and gases into space. This alternative may have been the basis of the 1958 high-altitude nuclear weapons test known as Operation Argus, or Floral, as it is sometimes known, ostensibly to test manipulating the Earth's radiation belts. Now, before I go on, I want to mention something very significant, which is that of something called fictional intelligence. I know that public episodes, we've covered them lately, but it's the concept. Again, we can factor in the consciousness angle of, esoterically you're influencing the minds of the masses by doing this. You could say that's drop feeding, but fictional intelligence is combining literal events which will occur. And the question is, how do you know they will occur? That's for, a separate conversation very shortly, will occur, and then write about it in a very popular piece of fiction. But again, just like sort of a truth burger, or if you want to call it, you mix the truth with the BS, except this time you're mixing genuine fiction with truth. Now, you might say, okay, Dave, genuine fiction, isn't that what they always do? No, the disinformation, misinformation, genuine and actual fiction, completely separate. So you'll see what I mean by this. It'll come full circle, guys, I promise, for those that stick around on the stream or for those that want to watch or listen after. So Alternative 1, okay, so basically a bunch of elites got together to make a handful of plans in case Earth was not sustainable to live on anymore, not just on the surface, but underground, you name it, even in orbit. Alternative 1 was to use a series of nuclear devices to attempt to blow a hole in the upper atmosphere. All right. What we'll see here is that Project Argus was carried out in half the time normally allocated for such a test. Additional evidence suggests that the top secret high frequency active auroral research project HARP may also be used for such a purpose. Again, The Obama administration is investigating attempting to modify the atmosphere as well. That's just a small
Yeah.
piece of it. Now, it says here, and I got to be careful. I think chemtrails is okay to say on YouTube, but it is important to include this in the discussion. Some evidence points to chemtrails being a modern implementation of Dr. Edward Teller's theory that global warming could be reduced or abated by jetsoning large quantities of metallic debris into the upper atmosphere to deflect sunlight and cool the Earth's surface. Chemtrails entail high altitude dumping of materials like barium and aluminum. But from Alternative Three's point of view, such projects have failed, so resources and planning were shifted to Alternative Two. Alternative Two recommended moving a percentage of the population into underground facilities, which I think they've done and they're still doing. Again, if that's human controlled or not, it's hard to say. I think a bit of both, really, alien and human controlled. This project is ongoing. And if Alternative 3 is to believe, then it will probably continue to the very end. The evidence for Alternative 2 is ever present around us, and the doomsday preparations going on are mind-boggling. We need look no further than the Nordic seed vault, a kind of Noah's Ark for seed species. Yeah. In the seed vault, there are no genetically engineered seed varieties. Other such vaults are either built or being planned around the world. From the human point of view, one among many examples is Camp David or Site R, and those are just the ones that we know about. I was going to mention NORAD, but it even says it here. Right. Nor should we forget the Denver airport, NORAD, again, deep underground military bases, all of that. Now, so apparently Alternative 2 was deemed a failure because, again, still on the planet technically, right? So if we see here, however, Alternative 3 was to move a selected population off planet to Mars, utilizing the moon as a way station, a grandiose and desperate plan, and the most nebulous. In the case in Alternative 1 and 2, we could easily show evidence of these projects, albeit obscured as Cold War survivability projects, however, be it nuclear weapons tests or underground. But moving selected populations off planet is a whole other discussion, implying a secret space program of some capacity. Absolute proof is impossible, and I appreciate that this person says this because, as he says, as we see here, there is no, quote, smoking gun style evidence for Alternative 3. Interestingly enough, though, elites have been known to have secret meetings and all that on nuclear-based submarines pertaining to off-planet projects. And of course, the former Israeli space defense minister saying, humans are working with aliens underground on Mars. We have on our members section, of course, the footage of the hexagonal structures on the backside of Mars, allegedly backside meaning, relative to Earth. Now, yeah. Right. So now let's get into the sort of cream of the crop of it all. Let's jump back to the tab on the left-hand side, brother.
Okay.
There we go. So this episode was titled Alternative 3 and began with an investigation into a string of mysterious disappearances among top scientists. What followed was sensational. The scientists the show discovered had been recruited into a top secret clandestine space program designed to build a base on Mars in anticipation of a forthcoming ecological catastrophe on Earth. Now, the TV station that broadcasted it, Anglia TV, was immediately bombarded with calls from alarmed viewers. The alarm was unwarranted, they were told, because like Orson Welles' War of the World in 1938, Alternative 3 was in fact a hoax. Interestingly enough, if we scroll down,
for a second. They retroactively claimed it to be a hoax. I'm asking more from my own understanding, or it was always supposed to be, because it didn't seem like it was supposed to be a hoax. I think they
tried to
make it after the fact.
Correct. Right. Okay. Now, this is what's interesting. Yeah. Before we go on, I want to point out, just to sort of substantiate the validity of this. Let's jump to the fourth tab, brother.
Okay.
We see here now this website right here. It's a very old website. It's again sacred-text.com. What's interesting here is that placed in the public domain, we'll read at the top, from the Vanguard Sciences Archives on October 28th, 1989. So here's what we're seeing. This article is taken from the Windward's newsletter. All right. The Truth About Alternative 3 from its author, Leslie Watkins. Look at this. In our June issue, we told you about the controversial book, Alternative 3, by British author Leslie Watkins. In our attempt to find out if the shocking theories in the book were true, we called Avon Books, the American publisher. They said the book was out of print in the States. They then called Penguin Books in London and found that it was listed on their non-fiction list. A
Mm.
senior editor told us there that it was officially classified as fiction based on fact. The author's agent told us it was most definitely fiction. We wrote to the author himself to try to get the real story, and here is the letter he sent us. Dear Miss Dittrich, thank you for your letter. Naturally, I am delighted by your interest in Alternative 3 and by the fact that you plan to sell it in the Windward's bookstore. I will certainly cooperate in any way I can. Now, check this out. The correct description of Alternative 3 was given to you by the representative from Penguin Books. The book is based on fact, but uses that fact as a launchpad for a high dive into fiction. In answer to your specific questions, there is no astronaut named Grodin. There is no Scepter television, and the reported Benson is also fictional. There's no Dr. Gerstein. Now, look at this. Yes, a documentary was televised in June 1977 on Anglia TV, which went out to the entire national network in Britain. It was called Alternative 3 and was written by David Ambrose and produced by Christopher Miles, whose names were on the book for contractual reasons. This original TV version, which I expand immensely for the book, was actually a hoax which had been scheduled for transmission on April Fool's Day. All right, now it says that the timing of all this had to be delayed and all of that. Now, take a look at this. Unfortunately, if we scroll down to the second, unfortunately, a chest containing the bulk of the letters was among the items which were mysteriously lost in transit some 4 years when I moved from London, England to Sydney, Australia, before I moved on to settle in New Zealand. For some time after Alternative 3 was originally published, I have reason to suppose that my home telephone was being tapped, and my contacts who were experienced in such matters were convinced that certain intelligence agencies considered that I probably knew too much. Now we see here, unfortunately, Alternative 3 is no longer available. Windwards bought all the remaining copies from the British publisher, and those quickly sold out. Interestingly enough.
So, they say it's no longer available. That would still mean if they sold them after buying them all, people have it out there in the world, kind of like a collector's item.
Right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, sort of like a collector's item. And again, interestingly enough, though, it's been bought up very substantially. So let's jump back to the expose page. Okay, so we see here it's inspired hundreds of conspiracy theories, yada, yada. Okay, here we go. The fictional Alternative 3 culminates with the reporter decoding a videotape which reveals footage of a joint Soviet-American mission to Mars in 1962. All right, now take a look at this. Let's scroll past the video here. Okay. We have, of course, Gary McKinnon claimed to have found astonishing evidence that came out of this world program really does exist, hacking into top secret Pentagon computers and, NASA footage and all that. We saw that in the expose a few weeks back. He found, files detailing non-terrestrial officers. Now, if we scroll down to parallel space programs, take a look at this. This is when it gets interesting because it's a different expose from what we looked at a few weeks back. As far as the general public are concerned, the American space program is run by NASA, signed into existence by Eisenhower in 1958. NASA was primarily a civilian organization built upon early military space programs, Operation Paperclip. Its many high-profile projects like Gemini, the Apollo moon missions, and the space shuttle were subject to much publicity and scrutiny. Now, interestingly enough, despite this, the U.S. Air Force, continued to operate an almost entirely unknown, vast, and clandestine parallel space program even after the formation of NASA. Interestingly enough, we can substantiate that with Don Phillips saying back in the 2001 piece of footage, saying there is a 3-letter agency under contract to the CIA that not replaces, but is a secret Air Force in the United States. This was 21 odd years ago, so things could have increased, changed, hard to say. Now, interestingly enough, this program rivaled, if not exceeded, the ambition of Apollo and the space shuttle. Here's something I want to point out significantly, guys. Apparently, the way in which there was a more positively oriented faction of ETs that were trying to help the Eisenhower administration a short handful of years after the Greada Treaty with the Orion Draco Greys and reptilians were signed. All right. What is interesting here is that it's been alleged that these positively oriented or benevolent beings gave us the advancements of rocketry and propulsion relative to that time frame to sort of combat the Orion Draco takeover, even though these more benevolent beings knew at the time it was going to be more of a prolonged process because a contract had just been signed. And we can substantiate this or corroborate this because Dr. Hermann Oberth, who was the mentor to Werner von Braun, said, and I quote, "We cannot attribute all the advancements in rocketry and propulsion to our own. We've been helped by the people of other worlds," end quote. So again, take that as you will, right? By the way, guys, you might see me make some references to things I've done in streams prior. It's just because the evidence still stands for itself in these cases, right? But I don't mean to sound like I'm repeating things. But take a look at this. The Air Force has long since run black projects that were so secret the public and sometimes even Congress were completely unaware of their existence. No, they were always unaware of their existence. Let's be completely, various aircraft like the Nighthawk were financed, developed, and operated under total secrecy. We got to go past this Nighthawk thing. This is, I mean, just a small piece of it. If we look at, for example, what Phil Schneider had said, he said that, there's a piece of, I guess you could say, extraterrestrially trackable metal in each one of these black project aircraft, which wouldn't surprise me. Now, take a look. If we scroll down, could they have similar top secret space projects that remain entirely unknown? In the late 1950s, the Air Force spent billions of dollars on Dyna-Soar, an advanced reusable space plane. They then quietly announced its cancellation in 1963. In the mid-60s, they canceled plans for a space station called the MOL, the Manned Orbital Laboratory. Again, why? There were aliens up there. Let's be honest. That would have broken the whole paradigm of religion and oil and pharmaceutical, the whole thing. Again, Project A119 as well to blow up the moon and all that. Project A119.
Well, I think
that didn't work.
I think a lot of this. I've talked recently about it, at least on members things. What happened in 1971 perspective? This is right beforehand, right? So I maybe a view that in 1971 they worked it out. Maybe in a diminished reality sort of way. They could start sending satellites up and it wouldn't be a problem. They could start, or I think that, because that's timing is.
Yes, absolutely. And guys, I want to say as well to those watching or listening right now, if you can, please stay tuned because you're going to see from an esoteric and a scientific angle of parallel universes and all that, how and why this comes into play. It may seem a little bit boring right now, but I promise it gets better.
Oh, it may, this is connecting the dots. We got a fucking constellation going on. We're over 100. Right. People are still climbing. It's still going.
Nice. Yeah. Awesome. Thank you so much, everyone, by the way. It's because of you guys we can even do this. So Project Horizon was an ambitious plan for a manned moon base that predates NASA's first moon landing in 1969. It, too, was discreetly canceled before it could come to fruition. From my understanding, Project Horizon was in correspondence or was, in fact, Project A119, if I'm not mistaken, and all within that same year. One of the first steps of trying to make Project Horizon go forward, or other sub-projects, if you will, was to take a nuke to the moon. Get our nuclear stockpile ready because we got to make a point to every other world power that we got there first and it's our thing, yada, yada. It didn't even get there. As many of you know the popular story, right? Craft came, shot a bunch of beams at it. It just, the missile just collapsed, just fell. So we see here in 1989, the New York Times reported that the Air Force had shut down yet another manned space program with a staff of 32 astronauts and a space shuttle launching facility in Colorado. Until the announcement, which appeared in just one newspaper, the existence of this massive non-NASA space project was completely unknown. It doesn't seem credible that the Air Force would spend so many hundreds of billions of dollars on multiple manned space programs and then quietly mothball them all with no results. Again, going back to that concept of the elites and their cheap parlor tricks, we could use this as a great example. We spend hundreds of billions of dollars or tens of billions of your money, and no, that's it. It's canceled. Too bad. And we didn't even know about it before anyways. So again, take a look at this. Now, a curious diary entry, in addition to, by the way, I want to mention transcript. I have the transcript by President Ronald Reagan in 1985 suggests that such a possibility may not be so far-fetched. In the diaries published long after his presidency, Reagan recounts a meeting at the White House with several top space scientists. On page 334, he states, and I quote, "It was fascinating. Space truly is the last frontier, and some of the developments there in astronomy, etc., are like science fiction, except they are real. I learned that our shuttle capacity is such that we could orbit 300 people. End quote. Presuming Reagan wasn't simply confused or mistaken, this claim is impossible with the prospect of a secret space program. When did we ever have 300 people in space? Yeah, America's space shuttle has a capacity of 8 people, and only 5 of them were ever built. So
Yeah,
again, eight
and
times
we've
five.
we've never even even prototypes, designs, even like pretend attempts, 300 people, nothing ever close as
That's
far as
four.
we the public know.
Right, that's 40 people. If you 8 times 5, that's 40
Yeah.
people, and that's just over 10% of 300. So again, what like now if we see here, excuse me, 1 second. Here we are. In 2002, the hacker Gary McKinnon was accused by the U.S. government of the biggest military computer hack of all time under the guise of Now, this is interesting because people, for example, think of them what you will, but Edward Snowden, he's got a sort of defect to Russia, if you will. Julian Assange, completely is being extradited back to the U.S. But you see the hell that guy's going through. Think of him what you will. Gary McKinnon, he's totally free and fine. Why? My opinion, brushing over the small details, is that ultimately the alien agenda or the alien narrative, especially 20 years back, was far too significant for any public to know. So the front end of the system of the law, regardless of the nation one would be in, he just so happened to be in the UK in this time, would not have even been applied. Why? Because it would have caused media press attention. So in some cases, the best thing to do, in my opinion, is nothing. And that's true for cases of organized crime, yada, you name it, right? Look at the Ghislaine Maxwell trial. So we see here, under the guise of the name Solo, Gary McKinnon hacked into dozens of Air Force, NASA, and Pentagon computers. They charged him with 7 counts of computer-related crime, which could have seen him receive a 70-year prison sentence. Now, if we scroll down more, he first found a spreadsheet detailing a list of Air Force officers with their names and ranks. What was interesting about this was the file that was titled non-terrestrial officers. All right. Based on what else he found, McKinnon does not think this is a reference to aliens, but human officers serving in space. Mm-hmm. Also in the file was information about ship-to-ship transfers. What made the file doubly strange was none of the ship names or indeed officers seemed to exist. One of them being the USS Hillencoder, if I'm not mistaken. I think
that was one of the
or USSS. I think there's 3. I'm not sure.
Yeah, because the spaceships get another S. Yes.
Right. Now we see here. This is when it gets interesting because McKinnon was aware of the case of Donna Hare, an ex-NASA employee who said the agency had a department in Building 8 at the Johnson Space Center whose job was to airbrush UFOs out of space images. All right. McKinnon found an unguarded computer at Building 8 and looked for evidence to corroborate Hare's story. Incredibly, he says he found it. There was a series of folders on the computer labeled raw and processed. Inside the raw folder, he found an image of large silvery cigar-shaped craft pictured in orbit over the northern hemisphere. Again, if we scroll down a little bit more, we'll see here that, again, it says, was there anyone else to corroborate his claims? Well, if we look at the 2001 National Press Club event, it was said from multiple people, even during the question and answer period at the end, that yes, there is a satellite that does in fact scrub through all the images taken of Earth and space before it gets to the public domain of NASA. And of course, a lot of people 20 years ago, reporters in the National Press Club, you could hear a lot of grunting and like, oh, I don't believe that. I'm not sure. Yeah, the whole thing. Again, you'd say that nowadays, that's nothing. They're taking videos that they don't want off of our phones these days, in our personal saved photo library. So again, that's nothing.
And we clicked agree on the terms of service, so they're allowed to. But the problem is here, and I'm sure to get into it, but they couldn't take him to trial because he would have been able to call these non-terrestrial officers to the stand. And that's why they've processed and prosecuted Julian Assange way more than they even ever tried to go off on him, because different things you know what I mean? They really couldn't do anything to this guy.
Right, exactly. Now, if we jump on over, before we continue to chapter 3, disclosure in this expose, I wanted to jump over, brother, to the 5th tab. Here we are. The one to the left. The 4th tab. My bad. So we'll see here now. Think of, I want to elaborate on this as well as I can, as concisely as I can. Please put aside for a second, folks, what we're looking at here on Bibliotheca Play. It's a great indexing website, but we're seeing some conversation from someone by the name of, Billy Meyer, you name it, right? I'm not, again, a lot of people don't believe his story, you name it. That's not the point here. The point is to understand the premise of what we're looking at relative to fictional intelligence. And you'll see why I say this. Now, we understand the Greys, the reptilians. I'm not going to get into that simply because it's not the time. Let's look at this box right here. The Dal universe is also part of the Galactic Federation. This is interesting. So what we'll find here is that Raphael asks, how was the universe created? Billy then says, our universe, the Dern universe, and you'll see why I bring this up, was created by the Big Bang, a reaction of chemical elements, which, by the way, are the same everywhere in the universe. All life forms, galaxies, suns, and planets are located in the fourth belt, the solid belt. Just to complete the picture, the Dern universe has a twin universe, the Dal universe, which means it is connected, which is connected through a kind of doorway. What does Dal mean? And Billy then replies and says, nothing special, a name like any other one. Now, it says here, perhaps you can define the Dal universe. The Dal universe, according to Billy here, is a parallel or twin universe to our Dern universe that came into existence the same time as ours, simply each one as a counterpart to one another. One universe could not exist without the other. Now, that's the end of that particular individual's answer, and I'll get to the fictional intelligence angle in a second. But the Federation races are non-interventionist in that they believe deeply in freedom and will never try to influence or persuade other developing races to block or violate their right to make free will choices. And in fact, they seek to assist in spiritual development. The Federation forces on Earth are based under Death Valley and Mount Shasta in California. Now, before I go on, I just want to say one little side angle of fictional intelligence is this non-interventionist perspective. What does that remind us of? Of course, we have Star Trek. Now, to get to the best part of this sort of fictional intelligence angle, for those that are familiar with the show called Counterpart with J.K. Simmons, very, very great show. And I do believe it is a form not just of drop feeding, but of fictional intelligence. And I will explain very quickly what it's all about. Basically, at the end of the Soviet Union, the collapse of the Soviet Union in 1991, what ended up happening was Eastern Bloc scientists, because you had the KGB running things in Germany, part of Germany, Eastern Bloc German scientists did something very similar to what we know to be the CERN Large Hadron Collider in 2012, right? That's a whole other thing. These scientists apparently split from 1991 onward. They split into a separate reality. So everything from 1991 and onward now has a separate reality. The genetics are the same, but the experiences from 91 and onward of your parallel other is completely different. Their own experiences, their own lives, you name it. Now, here's what's interesting as well. Think of a loaf of bread. We are in one reality as one slice of that bread. The slice next to us is that other slice. And what's interesting about this is that
we're still in the same loaf, and that's the metaphor that really drives home, because it is the same loaf.
It's the same loaf. And just like it says here, that one universe cannot go without the other, just like a loaf of bread or like a Domino's or whatever, one loaf, one bread, you take one slice out, the other slices tend to collapse. Again, just it's a metaphor, but you see what I mean. So interestingly enough, in that show, there's a tunnel that actually you can go from one reality to the other. And there are, opposite yous. So there would be, for example, another version of Camden on this other reality of myself, right? And our experiences were the same up until 1991. After that and onward, they were very different. Now, here's what's interesting. There are intelligence agencies that are conducting covert clandestine operations in the show, of course, and they're going to the other side to spy, collect data, gather information on the other reality, and then return back. That, I'll be honest with you folks, I can't help but think there is some angle of that could in fact be true. Why? Quantum physics warrants us to think about these things. You don't have to take my word for it. Take a look at a lot of these articles just in the last couple of weeks, suggest, you name it. Now, not only this, but Staff Sergeant Clifford Stone mentioned this in a 2006 interview with Project Camelot. He also said, interestingly enough, 2016-17 would be the year, in addition to, as I've said before, Lieutenant Colonel Richard French and so many others, would be the year that things have to change. 2017 was the New York Times article regarding UFOs. We see the slow dissemination of that type of, again, drop feeding to the public. Now, let's jump back to the expose. Yeah. So we see here, Okay, some ex-employees of NASA, the military, and its defense contractors have come forward in recent years with evidence that supports the secret space program theory. While some of these whistleblowers tell stories so bizarre and incredible they have to be discounted, others are more credible. Now, this is what's interesting because, again, define bizarre because things are getting more and more interesting
Yeah,
as
like what is bizarre anymore? It seems normal to me.
Exactly. So, in 1965, Sergeant Carl Wolf was a young electronics expert at United States Air Force Tactical Air Command at Langley in Virginia. One day, he was called over to an NSA facility to examine a fault in some photographic equipment. The lab was processing images of the moon's surface taken by the lunar orbiter. One thing immediately struck Wolf. There were hundreds of scientists from all over the world at the facility speaking dozens of different languages. Wolf felt this peculiar, especially at the height of the Cold War, which only makes us think even more, guys, honestly, that, the whole concept of the Cold War and all that, for as sad as the everyday people that suffered from those instances, was in large part, again, maybe a multi-layer chess game, but there was a larger chess game at play here that was much more important to Reagan and Gorbachev. Allegedly, Ronald Reagan told Gorbachev that there are aliens and all that. And to add to that, when Gorbachev visited Washington, D.C., the United States, some years later, he was asked in the media, he was asked by the American press, do you think that the Soviet Union, Russia, the USSR, should give up their nukes? You can find the footage. Gorbachev's wife steps in, and you know what she says? She goes, "No, we shouldn't give up nukes, and no country here should give up nukes because the aliens are among us." She says that. Again, it aired once.
No,
Yeah,
it's just it's not even that hard to find. I remember.
Yeah.
It's just a
Yeah, exactly.
said.
Yeah, exactly. No, exactly. That's the thing. And so, again, that is not proof, but that is another thing we can add to the metaphorical chamber of ammunition, so to speak.
Right.
So we see here he got talking with a photographic technician processing the lunar orbiter images. The man appeared disturbed, and I quote, "We found a base on the backside of the moon," he said. Sorry guys, 1 second. I gotta adjust my camera. Hold on.
Oh, I hate popcorn ceilings.
Oh yeah, there we go. There we go. Okay.
There you go. That's good.
We found a base on the backside of the moon. Wolf was stunned. The technician then showed him contact prints that showed the base. Wolf observed large domes, towers, and what looked like radar dishes. The fictional Alternative 3 suggested the secret space program had built a moon base as a staging point for a mission to Mars. Was this it? I don't think it was, but interestingly enough, I think there's a lot of I guess you could say interesting points that corroborate to this, and you'll see why.
Yeah.
Donna Hare, right, tells a similar story. As a NASA contractor in the 70s, she encountered an employee whose job it was to airbrush UFOs out of NASA photos. Intrigued, Hare sniffed around for more information. She heard chatter that the Apollo astronauts had observed artificial structures and even spacecraft on the moon. Now, John Schusler spent 36 years as an aerospace engineer at Boeing and worked on numerous NASA projects. He too recalled seeing Apollo images containing UFOs. I want to bring up something before I go on. A lot of people say, okay, how compartmentalized is this project and what have you? Well, let's put it this way, guys. And this is a true story. Back in the I believe it was the 1980s, if I'm not mistaken, there was a CIA analyst that was responsible for overseeing major, analyzing images and all that. And he was the guy that the CIA went to when they needed to analyze certain images over the course of various nations around the world, multiple different times. He's a very talented individual. They said, hey, we have this, we have a friend of his said, could you please analyze this set of film for me? There were 20 frames on the film. I believe it was around that. It was about 20 frames. Mm-hmm. Long story short, what ended up happening was this guy's friend gave it to the CIA analyst. The CIA analyst looked at it. He then used the official CIA offices or laboratories, if you will, or, analyst areas to look at the film. He then sent it up the chain to the CIA because apparently the first 4 frames of that 20 frame reel had some of the best, not just black and white, but some of the best UFO footage out there up close, the whole thing. Apparently, his friend had filmed it and said, "Listen, I encountered something in my very large, in my large yard and all that, and I want to show you." And this UFO came landing. It landed. It had apparently this was apparently a sort of Nachtwaffen craft. It had the German symbol on it, the whole thing. Next thing you know, the gentleman goes into work the next day, the CIA analyst, and he asks, "Hey, can I get the 20 frames? Can I get the film reel back?" What ended up happening? They gave it back, but they didn't give back the first 4 frames were not there. They only gave back 16 out of the 20 frames. And then he said to his superiors, "Did you see anything noticeable? Because why did you guys keep the first 3-4 frames?" You know what they said? They said, I forgot exactly what they said it was. They said no. They said it was just gas or something that we saw, but it
They
was
did swamp
apparently
gas
it was
again,
footage. Like,
literally.
I know it was something like that. But the point I'm trying to make here, guys, is that the CIA's own guy, who, or again, this is back in the day. I'm sure there's different divisions now, but the CIA's own guy, responsible and the head of overseeing the Soviets during the peak of the Cold War, the KGB headquarters and all that stuff, who also claimed to Congress that he said, and this was in the 80s, but he said as early as the 50s, the mid to late 50s, he could see millimeters of snow drop on the statues outside of the KGB headquarters. This guy was covered up and he was entrusted with high-level security clearances for years and years and years. And his own employer didn't want him to know about the UFO subject or the alien subject. That's how compartmentalized it is. Now, we see here, if we go back to the expose, when accessing NASA's official photo archive of the mission, he was unable to find the photos. The numerically indexed images had been removed from the collection. Perhaps and this was John Schulzer, who spent 36 years as an aerospace engineer at Boeing and worked on NASA projects, right? So he tried to go back to look for those images, couldn't find them. However, perhaps the most unlikely whistleblower for a secret space program is the military of France. In 2007, Colonel, is that Ives Blin? I think Ives,
yes,
right?
Ives is how you pronounce it. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you. Colonel Ives Blin of the French Department of Defense announced some very intriguing data gathered by their Graves space radar system. Some 20 to 30 satellites were detected that appeared not to exist. The U.S. Defense Department maintains a list of all satellites in orbit, including the classified military satellites of other countries, and none of these were listed. These mysterious satellites were then almost certainly launched by the U.S. themselves. While not evidence for Alternative 3, it did prove the existence of a clandestine space program of a kind. Whatever the purpose of these satellites, they would require a large infrastructure back on Earth: facilities, funding, tech, staff, rockets, launch pads, all operating in secret. Is it too much of a stretch to propose this infrastructure had achieved far more than just launching satellites? Could it have been responsible for the UFOs and structures observed on the moon by some witnesses? It's hard to say, but ultimately, if we see here, I think it's a bit of both. ETs were there, and of course, humans added to it. I think also this is not the first time humans have been off planet, and I think maybe not the first time humans have built structures on other planets.
Breakaway civilization style of thing. Yeah.
Right. We see here the idea that the U.S. military may have secretly established a base on the moon is far-fetched, but not so outrageous as to be entirely dismissed. But in Alternative 3, a moon base was simply a staging point for a mission to Mars. In terms of scale, ambition, and complexity, this would be far in excess of a moon base. Now, here's what's interesting. However, in 2010, evidence that such a mission has already occurred came from the most unlikely source. Laura Eisenhower, the great-granddaughter of former President Dwight Eisenhower, says she was approached in 2006 to take part in a mission to the Red Planet. She was joining, she said she was told she would be joining a base on Mars, set up as a survival colony in the event of a catastrophe on Earth. This was then the exact same scenario proposed in Alternative 3. Now, her story was ridiculed by most people. However, she seems sincere and no doubt believes what happened was genuine. Again, I do want to say for those on our members section, I don't want to sort of just name drop, if you want to call it, but there was someone that came on the show very recently that also helped corroborate and substantiate this also because if I'm not mistaken, he knows Miss Eisenhower quite well. And he and her are in very strong agreement. It's that for members that know, it's that new series that we started.
Yeah.
We'll see here, verisimilitude, excuse me. So we'll see here. Alternative 3 was the third of 3 proposed schemes to avert a forthcoming ecological catastrophe on Earth. Now, Alternative one was to use nuclear bombs to blow holes. Yeah, we went through all of that. If we keep going down, there's a picture here of the alternative three book. Interestingly enough, take a look at this. One of the most potent ideas in Alternative 3, right above the picture, was the prospect that mankind was on the verge of an ecological cataclysm. This was a worrying concept at the forefront of the public consciousness when the program was broadcast in 77. Alarmist stories had begun to emerge about both global warming and global cooling. Dire warnings of extreme weather and environmental chaos were all over the newspaper. Again, fictional intelligence, ficant as it's called. And I also want to mention too very strongly, keep in mind, folks, with what's going on in the world right now, I got to be careful because YouTube, not just for the boop bop, if you want to call it that, the jab, but for even the thing with,
Someone in the chat
web.
said the Max scene, which I think is a play on Ghislaine
Yeah.
and the word you're
Oh,
talking about, which is really funny.
Oh my God, that's hilarious. We'll see here as we looked before. This is why I wanted to look at that website that was, all black with green letters and words, because again, that's a very old website. Seems like, oh, this is a nothing burger, but look at this. Much of Alternative 3 was then based in fact. Could the more outrageous aspects of the plot be true too? Author Leslie Watkins came to believe so. Watkins was hired to write a novelization of Alternative 3 in 1978 that greatly expanded upon the story presented in the TV show. After its publication, he received hundreds of letters from what he regarded as credible sources confirming the basic premise behind the book. The book is fiction based on fact, but I now feel that I inadvertently got very close to a secret truth. Watkins decided to use some of the evidence sent to him to begin a non-fictional sequel to Alternative 3, but backed out after he came to suspect his phone and correspondence was being monitored by intelligence services.
So this would propose that he wasn't being an agent. He wasn't out there trying to, work with the people that made the TV show to like propagate this hoax, whatever they called it. He didn't mean to get close to a truth. Do we believe that? Do we think he literally was trying to, just like we talked about just with Ani, he was doing it of pure intention, we think?
I think
It's
it
hard
was
to
with
say,
pure
right?
intent. It's hard to say. It is very hard to say. Now, one of the great things about this expose, and I hope those watching or listening will appreciate this too, is evidence against. Let's do a quick little anecdotal debate, if you want to call it. Critics of the idea of a secret space program point out the vast amount of money that would be required to mount such an operation. While the U.S. military has long run black budgets, the amount of unaccounted money that would be required to construct bases on the moon and Mars would be eye-wateringly vast. Such a program would completely dwarf the Apollo moon missions, which cost in current prices $110 billion. I could not agree more. Could huge sums be generated off the books? Bill Sweetman, editor of Defense Technology International, estimated the U.S. military black budget to be $50 billion in 2010. To put that into context, NASA's budget in the same year was just $17 billion. So huge amounts of money are available, but much of that is already spent on conventional black military projects, planes, missiles, bombs, and so forth. But it gets even better.
And well, to that degree, the same sense, we have to think about it. Just said planes, missiles, bombs. Those things aren't things they're not sending into space, theoretically, if this is the game we're playing. So it's like NASA's is their public, we're not good at space still, like front
Yes.
kind of thing.
I would say so. And in addition to that, I was going to get to also the other angle of like the drug money,
Right.
being used for this. But you make a great point. I appreciate that because we see here when it says other sources of revenue would still be needed beyond the traditional black budget dollars. Hold on a second. If we go back up to this paragraph, we see here, so huge amounts of money are available, but much of that is already spent on conventional projects like planes, missiles, bombs, and so forth. Hold on a second. Remember that fighter jet plane that they said they spent $1 trillion on over 20 years to make the
Yeah.
lightest fighter jet in the world? They said they scrapped the plan, it didn't work, and they had
Yeah.
nothing to show. 20, excuse me, what was it? Was it 20 billion or?
It was no. I think your trillion
it-
word might have been right.
I think it was
can go
trillion. I think it
check,
was
but
trillion.
They grossly went over budget and then said we kind of just decided not to do it after we spent all that money. My bad.
They had pardon my English here, folks, jack shit to show for. Not, they didn't even have a document with a piece of paper listing their freaking failures of the project. So you're telling me that all that money just magically disappeared, like it all went into that plane and it disappeared? Come on, I mean, that's. I understand things fail, projects fail, but you don't hold on to a failing project for 20 odd years. Like I don't. I mean, maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm wrong. Maybe I'm speaking too confidently here, but um, we see here uh, a project on the scale of alternative 3 would generate millions of financial transactions, employ tens or hundreds of thousands of people, and involve hundreds of technology and engineering companies. I don't think it would need hundreds of those companies, but um, could this really be done under absolute secrecy without more people coming forward and admitting involvement? It's doubtful that would be effectively. It's doubtful that what would be effectively the biggest undertaking in human history could really be kept so secret. I don't think it has been. People have come out. They've just been labeled crazy right off the bat, so to speak, right? In
Yep.
terms of, people like how this would require hundreds of thousands of people. I couldn't agree more. What about the millions of missing, not just children, but adults from the national parks every year that goes unreported? We
Native
also,
women is a big one right now. Yeah.
yes, Native women. In addition to that, we also have, again, military soldiers being just disappearing, and then all of a sudden, the family gets a nice boatload of cash. You stay quiet, and then everything is taken care of. And not only that, but there's just so much more. If you want to talk about the more, I guess you could say, unsubstantiated claims, which is the 20 and back program. Well, not entirely unsubstantiated, but 20 and back program. That would be a whole other realm of thinking relative to what I was talking about with counterpart, because Clifford Stone had said as well that, again, I'm not saying we should take these people's words as if it's prophecy, but again, the data points, the consistency. Clifford Stone said if you traveled back in time, or so on and so forth, you would not notice evidence of time travel unless there was some type of physical inscription or something like this within
Right.
a structure. Because, like the loaf of bread example, that one loaf of bread, just because you're going back and forth on that loaf of that slice of bread, excuse me, doesn't mean that you're going back and forth on the other slices. So you see what I'm saying here, guys? So
It's
again, I'm not.
because
Yeah,
it's still your singular reality, so there would be no perception of time travel to you, because that's just what your timeline, your slice of bread is now. You know what I
right.
mean? Yeah, no, absolutely, right, yeah.
Exactly. We see here, now it says here, where's the hardware? Oh, by the way, also I wanted to mention Iran Contra, that whole thing. If you want to talk about money, drug money, I mean, come on, it's yeah, like if they want to say where's the money coming, come on. Anyways, where number 2, where's the hardware? If a large spaceship was really orbiting over the northern hemisphere as McKinnon claimed, wouldn't it be noticed? Right? Again, visibility. Lockheed Martin has on their website now, they're fully admitting to it. Like, it's completely
Literally.
invisible. Yeah, we can bend light waves, and that, don't even get me started on that. But also, not to mention also cell phones, catching thousands of sightings every day at this point. So I think this question is a little bit outdated, so to speak, maybe. But
Yeah,
because what are you going to
yeah.
say? All those sightings are deep fakes. All of them are, like, thousands every day. Like, I mean, it just, to me, it doesn't seem, but we see here there are hundreds of satellites in orbit from dozens of countries around the world, yet none appear to have detected the presence of such a craft. Again, if you were to keep a handful of world nations under a particular power structure, like, oh, I don't know, NATO, you could kind of control a lot of things. And again, the countries that aren't under NATO, you have more slip ups, just like we do. What's the country? What are the main countries that aren't under NATO? China and Russia.
Yeah.
How many Russian generals have come out? I mean, again, it's so. Nor have any of the millions of amateur astronomers on Earth observed the craft with their telescopes. And when they haven't reported it because they don't want to be ridiculed, or if they have, they've been ridiculed, literally. So, excuse me 1 second here. An orbiting spaceship and bases on the moon and Mars would require hundreds of launches from Earth to construct, all of which would have to occur in complete secrecy and remain unobserved by anyone. Well, again, we also have to keep in mind something that is called diminished reality. There's different kinds. There's augmented reality, virtual reality. There's something called diminished reality, where, again, I'll type in very quickly the definition of diminished reality, just to give you folks the exact definition. Okay. Diminished reality is a term used to describe the control over one's reality and the ability to block out real or digital information at will. The term was coined by wearable computing pioneer Steve Mann to describe a reality that can remove at will certain undesired aspects of regular reality. What does that remind us of? Ooh, Project Bluebeam, doesn't it? So when people say, Project Bluebeam is all over the place, it's everywhere all around us, we got to consider that. Not saying it's entirely factual, but we got to consider it. Now, take a look at this. Furthermore, countries with a traditional enmity to the West, such as Russia, North Korea, China, and Iran, have all launched their own satellites and probes to both the moon and Mars. How could the craft and the bases be concealed from them? Again, not concealed from them. They're in on it. Alternative 3 proposes that governments from around the world would conspire together, but this would suggest that the evident hostility of such rival countries is actually a public charade or charade. Yeah, and sadly, people die as regular innocent people die as a part of this charade. But yeah, just my opinion. Could it really be that the Cold War, which brought the world to the brink of nuclear Armageddon on more than one occasion, was a sham, and the USSR and US were secretly working together all along? Well, I mean, to be honest with you, actually, could you do a quick favor, Camden? Could you pull up on Telegram? Could you go to the Generation Z announcements channel and put up the post I gave? This is just for, usually Telegram is just for our members, but I want to show it's a screenshot of a bunch of different news articles of me saying, like, look at this, look at the fear mongering angle of it. And I want to bring this up, folks, because I think it's very important to coincide with this. Oh, sorry, you're on mute, brother. Sorry, guys, just give us a second.
No, I know I'm muted. I didn't mean to.
Oh, no worries.
You mean the, yeah, I got it saved. Hold on one second, I gotta pull up.
By the way, we're going to be looking at some really cool images very shortly as well, guys, in the upcoming tabs. We have it nice and prepared for everybody, and a nice the Mark of the Beast angle, which we haven't covered yet, in addition to the here we are, in addition to some cool videos. Yes, right here, this screenshot right here. I mean, again, when you look at it from the grander picture, the Sun, routers, Daily Mail, the whole thing, Moscow, nuclear war, this whole thing, I can't help but think, if under the presumption that extraterrestrials, for better or worse, would not allow us to launch nukes, obviously for better, but maybe for their interest or ours is hard to say, but they won't let us launch, technically speaking. So what's going on here? All of this in the last 2-3 weeks alone. The concept of fear mongering and pushing all of this as a dissemination of information to engage an emotional response, right? As we all would imagine. Now, let's, if we could, Camden, brother, I know you went through all that work just to get it up, but just to get the picture up. So we'll see here. Let's jump to the 3, 4, 5, 6, the 7th tab.
You remember this one?
No, the one to the left of it. Oh, what the heck? Why do I have?
Oh, you might have them in a different order. Just tell me what
website. Oh, other Pleiadean youth. It's this one right here. Yeah, you're on it. Yeah.
Okay.
So let's scroll down a little bit more. All right. So. All right, here we are. So the first was a discovery. This has to do with the case of Pleiadean interactions, and we're going to see how this comes full circle. The first was the discovery that a well-known Argentinian UFO researcher, Fabio Zerpa of Buenos Aires, was investigating a case involving Pleiadean contacts with engineer Enrique Rincon in Bogota, Colombia. This was a profound series of ongoing contacts that began in November of 1973 and was still going on. He thought his was the only such case too. Now, in 79, a correspondent who had read the magazine article called to attention another contactee case involving Pleiadean ETs who were visiting a gentleman by the name of Guillermo Torres of Hacienda Las Cruces and had been doing so since 1974. These Pleiadean ETs were also entirely human, as with the ones visiting the Colombian, but these contacts were centered near El Tocuyo on the north coast of Venezuela. Please forgive me if I butchered that, anybody that knows how to say that properly. actually. These ET visits and contacts were still going on too, and hundreds of pages of notes and technical dialogue had been recorded. This was also kept highly confidential with a small select group of participants who were not letting the story out. Apparently, this got back to the Alternative 3, which then was sent to the Majestic 12, which now is named Zodiac, the whole thing. Then in 1983, Lou Farish of the UFO News Clipping Service sent some notes on another Pleiadean contactee case that began in July of 74 and was also still ongoing. It involved contactee Charles Silva, who was repeatedly met by an ET human woman who said he could call her Ramatis, and that she and other euphonauts associated with her came here from their home planet in the Pleiades. The contacts were taking place in southern Peru, and they also are still going on up to this time. Silva described these contacts in a 411 page book privately published, which got little distribution. Another correspondent who had purchased a copy of the investigation of the Swiss case wrote and gave the address of another contactee. All right, whose ET visitor told him he came from the Pleiades, and more specifically, the Alcyone system or Alcyone system. His experiences began with sightings that led up to the later face-to-face contact and long discussions after Delamer Duveris was prepared for telepathic communication. Now we'll see here. I received some of the letters from sincere people who claimed they had observed UFO craft that were very similar or even identical with some of the spacecraft pictured in the preliminary report. All of the UFO clubs were receiving these too, which infuriated them to the extent that none of them ever told me what they were receiving. I had to get my information from those who were put down by the clubs for even reporting. Having examined all of this from a knowledgeable point of view, we can draw some comparisons that seem to be of interest. Now, again, this individual took cross-referencing of these different Pleiadean interactions. Again, what we're trying to do here on the show, the data points to look for potential progress within that of I guess you could say, cryptic information. Number one, all of those mentioned who have claimed they came from what we call the Pleiades looked as much human as we, and were all about our size and stature and build. All of them articulated the language of their contactees, speaking fluently on our sciences, history, and culture. They all said, all of them, that Earth humanity was descended from their own ancient ancestors from whom we had inherited our unusual aggressiveness. All of them said their ancestors had been here many times before over the ages, coming and going as conditions changed. They all claimed that they participated in some of the great events in our religious works and our mythologies, sometimes being adored and worshipped as gods, which they said they were not. They all claimed extensive lifespans, at least 10 times what is normal for us now. They all, without exception, deplore our misuse of our sciences today. Saying that our mind has outrun our spiritual development, and that we have already prepared the end of our planet and our own species as we know it, and that we have done this before over and over and still have not learned this important lesson. For this, we are a valuable laboratory study, and many ETs from far and wide come here to observe. It would make sense. Now, here's what's interesting about this. I personally, point number 7, I don't find much of an issue in this case in terms of the psychological angles. A lot of people, they get depressed. They say, oh, this is very sad. We're a lab study. For me, I look at it glass half full. We're a lab study. Fantastic. Let's figure out why we're in this lab, what we're being observed for, and how we can expand on that. That's just my perspective. So we'll see here. They all travel faster than the speed of light as we know it in their interstellar trips. There was no conclusive evidence that any of the groups mentioned were in direct contact with any of the other Pleiadean groups mentioned across the planet of Earth, right? They all mentioned other inhabited planets in what we call the Pleiades. They all mentioned other ET beings from elsewhere in the universe coming here to study and observe Earth. 3 mentioned actual contact and willing cooperation with other ETs of other race types and systems. 3 of them used robotoid, part mechanical, and part organic created beings in limited operational functions. All right? Again, they meant 3 mentioned actual contact. I think they're referring to the Greada Treaty. Right. They all used organic computers that could be controlled telepathically. They all foresaw great changes in our planet in the near future. None of them had money as we know it, religion, or a competitive political system. 3 of them had active bases operating on the surface of our planet. They all were capable of under-ocean operations and used our oceans to great advantage. They all used a variety of different spacecraft in their operations. And they all had distinctive styles of ships and equipment, yet there were many similarities in many respects. Can you imagine, by the way, if you are an advanced species and your species one day goes to another planet, which ends up being Earth, many, God knows how many eons ago, and that group just expands and expands, but then they start mucking things up or whatever, and then it becomes its own race, which then gets sort of species amnesia, as it's called.
Right.
The great, Noah's Ark, the whole flood 13,000 years ago. We were a
Yeah.
species with amnesia, being knocked on the head, so to speak.
Like
And then
forgotten
on top,
history type of stuff.
yeah, and then can you imagine visiting and coming and going and saying, "Man, this group that sort of went rogue on their own has devolved in such a sad way." I mean, like,
Do
uh,
put yourself in there? It's those things shoes. Do you step in? Do you like? Obviously they haven't,
right,
right? But do
right.
you? If you were, would you? I don't know.
Right, exactly. We see here point number 18. Three groups, excuse me, that we know of used very large carrier type motherships in deep space near our system while they were here. In again, the NASA photos of the alleged secret space program craft. I don't want to bring them up because they're copyrighted. I don't know if we'll get, yeah. In point number 19, in each case, to the group of individuals who formed around the contactee, the new context and information was so mind-boggling and profound, and so far exceeded their knowledge of what was going on elsewhere in this world, that they carefully guarded their secret within their own immediate circle for a number of years, and then only confided it to very trusted friends. Up until 1979, we'll see here, none of these groups had ever heard of each other, and there was no cross correspondence. Now, again,
On purpose, a kind of compartmentalization
it's
just naturally
possible.
occurring. Yeah.
It's very possible.
Hmm.
Um, Okay, so I did want to say Charles Silva, yes, having rested from his grueling trip from Lima, was up early, checked his watch at 6:30. It was raining heavily, yada yada. A short time later, he was having breakfast in the tiny lunchroom along the road. He noticed a pickup truck stop, excuse me, and let someone off. It was Ramatis, the ET woman from the Pleiades he had met back in July of 1974 when this all had begun for him. Rama was already aware of his return to the area and had hitchhiked a ride to the lunchroom to meet him. These contacts had already been going on for just about 6 months. He had by this time become convinced, after many demonstrations and revelations, that she was exactly what she said, which was an alien. He was beside himself with excitement and all ears as she told him that not far down the road from here was a ship waiting for them, and today was going to be his first ride in a spaceship. He couldn't believe his ears. He paid his bill, and they went out and got in the Volkswagen and drove for about 15 minutes in the direction the woman pointed out. Interestingly enough, they were moving towards Huancayo or Huancayo, I don't know how to pronounce that, unfortunately, when they came to a clearing where Rama asked him to pull off the road. He did and stopped the car there. Now, Rama took him by the arm and led the way. By then, the rain had let up considerably. As they walked, Chaco saw something that resembled a small rainbow, very weak in intensity. Rama told him that he was seeing an electromagnetic field that surrounds the spacecraft completely, thus making it invisible from all sides while standing on the ground. They were no more than 25 feet from the ship, and his eyes had not seen it. After they crossed the electrical field barrier, the ship came into full view. This was not like the Vimanas he had seen previously, as it was much larger, but of the same form and shape. Now that he was closer, he can see that it was definitely metallic with a silverish glow around it. Seen from that angle, it had a shape similar to a football, American style. The ship was resting on three metallic legs. Rama asked him to take off his shoes, and he wondered if Moses did the same on top of Mount Sinai so many long years ago. Rama had told him about some Exodus events. She said his shoes were wet from the rain, and water being a conductor of electricity, she didn't want him to get a shock. Interesting to see, again, the sort of, I don't want to say flaws, but within a certain craft, that it's not all entirely perfect. So again, that whole concept of a sort of godlike figure seems to be thrown out the window. Not that I would subscribe to one personally, but
Right.
we see here they were both given footwear similar to sandals made out of heavy wood, and they climbed up the metal ladder that descended from a circular door. As he entered, he experienced a sudden change of temperature and noticed that it was a bit colder than the already cold Andes Mountains. It was the same kind of feeling one gets upon entering an air-conditioned building from the heat outside, but this was stranger. Now, two crew members about 4.5 to 5 feet tall greeted them in silence. They were wearing one-piece suits of a shining gray color. It covered them from head to toe. There was no doubt they were humanoids, and he didn't remember ever having seen anything like this on Earth before. He had a creepy feeling, though they were very peaceful in demeanor. He felt safe with them, but still a lingering fear of the unknown existed and held him back a little bit. That didn't last long, for as soon as he took two more steps, he came face to face with their crew leader standing inside an oval room about 25 feet in length, 15 to 20 acres, and about 7 high. The illumination came from all over the room with a touch of an orange, almost a red glow. Now, before I go on, I just want to say, folks, that if you've seen Star Trek Next Generation, where Captain Picard takes some more inferior species in terms of their advancement, way less advanced species to to the USS Enterprise and shows them around. Apparently, that's happened many times over. So take a look at this.
What's that saying we've said recently? Magic is just science, like unexplained science.
Unexplained science.
Figured out yet? Yeah. There's no difference. That's what it is. There's no difference in magic and science you haven't figured out yet.
Right, exactly. Now let's take a look here. He had a nice face, benevolent attitude, long nose, and slanted eyes, not like Rama's, not Oriental either. When he looked at Chaco, who's the human, it was plain that he had no eyelashes and that he didn't blink, but there was definitely eye activity. It took him a little while to put his finger on what it was that made those eyes alive. It was the pupils that narrowed and widened as he communicated with them. After he got up from a triangular chair directly in front of some of the control panels, again, I want to point out that there are pictures, by the way, of inside of some of this craft describing the exact same situation from external to internal. The chair was triangular. The panel, there were no curvatures inside or outside the craft. It was all metallic. It was all telepathically based to control and orient and all that. The seat was triangular. And on top of that, the EMF field around the craft on the outside looked just like a rainbow, so to speak. I'll see if I could send you those images shortly, Camden. Let's see here. One second. After he got up from a triangular chair directly in front of some control panels, he walked forward to receive them, or greet them, if you want to call it. Rama and the crew leader exchanged glances. It seemed as though they had planned this visit. Then he looked at Chaco, who instinctively walked with him toward the control panel. The ET's mouth did not move, but Chaco could hear muffled words and sentences, and it sounded as though he had a heavy accent. He seemed to sense that Chaco had difficulty understanding him. Suddenly, he could hear him inside his head perfectly, in the same way that he and Rama had conducted their mind-to-mind chats. The ET showed Chaco around the craft. The instrument panels looked like the kind of consoles one would find in a computer operating room. There were portholes all around the craft, and his host told him that they were in an observation ship with a crew of 4. Up to this time, he had seen only 2. The ET flipped a switch, a so-called switch, and a screen-like device lit up, and they were able to see the outside of the spaceship where the other 2 crew members were. Where do you come? Again, that's pretty neat, isn't it? Where do you come from? Chaco asked. We are from a system not too far from here. The ET opened a scroll, and Chaco could see an oval map with many kinds of dots on it. He pointed to a group of stars and said, pointing, that this was the constellation of Taro, Star Alcyone, and the Pleiades. And he pointed to our sun. He showed Chaco, the human, his home planet on a map, but to him it just looked like a bunch of dots. The ET said they had bases on Mars and Venus, and Chaco answered, what about Earth? The captain responded, not our bases, but bases that all of us are cooperatively keeping here on Earth. It is our mission as peaceful intelligences to maintain the balance of the universe. With our terrestrial bases, we keep an eye on you. In a few minutes, we're going to see one of the bases here in South America, but first you must tell Rama where you want your car. Again, I know this sounds ridiculous and silly in a lot of regards, but we see here. Now, somehow they had hooked his Volkswagen up under the ship and he could see it on the screen. The thought hit him. What would the car rental agency think if they knew that one of their cars made it to Chiclayo in about 9 minutes from where they had been before, about 800 miles as the crow flies? Now that the car was attached and they were ready to depart, Rama exchanged some information with the crew leader, and Chaco was placed between him and Rama, and she went on to explain. This machine is operated through reversible electromagnetism. See these columns going to that rotor that looks like transparent plastic? Yes. Well, those are reactors. When the mercury in that rotor gets going full speed, we can reverse the magnetic and electrical energy. That way we can control matter and also overcome the forces of gravity. All right. Interestingly enough, now let's jump to the next tab to our right, if that's cool.
This one, right?
This is the, again, allegedly, this is why I want to be very vigilant when I say this. When we take a look at the members only section on Patreon, we covered this very recently about how Hitler claimed, that he had met the quote unquote new man, so to speak.
Yeah.
I don't know if these were the Pleiadians or not. It seems like this is very outdated old Pleiadian technology that was given to Hitler. I don't want to say if these were, again, shapeshifters disguised as Pleiadians. Hard to say. Apparently, again, this craft over here that we'll see, the Honebu 2, was again used those used those energy tachyons, and used the what we'll see here is these rotors, if you want to call it that, the mercury in the rotors. Now, sorry, Camden, before you
Yeah,
jump
no,
off,
I'm
could you
about to
just
go to the bathroom
sure,
for the stream, but keep going.
sure, if you could scroll down a little bit more, we'll see here. Keep going
Tell me where. Tell me where.
until you see the pictures.
Ah, okay.
Yeah. So again, these are some, again, the pictures that describe that same type of concept there, except apparently the technology given to the Nazis was extremely outdated, so to speak. Now, sure. Now, you guys will see shortly much more clearer pictures that describes what Chaco, if you want to
scroll down
call
a
it.
bit more before.
Oh, sure. Thank you. Keep going down. Keep going.
Like these things, right? Talking about these?
Right there. Keep going a little more down. Right there. Because
oh, dude. Yeah. Okay. I'll leave it.
Yeah. Sorry. Right. A little more up, if that's cool. Perfect. Right there. Now, apparently, this is exactly what was described and what was seen within Chaco's experience, so to speak. Now, interestingly enough, as well, let's go back. I'm just going to be reading for you guys while the images are put up. So, what we'll see is that. Hold on. Just want to make sure that I'm covering all the points here. Okay, so now. Yeah, basically what ends up happening here is that the transcript that I was just reading from on Bibliotheca Plates essentially goes through all of the different experiences. And again, it's very intriguing. So let me carry on with the Chaco story here. Now, we'll see. Here we are. Those are reactors. When the mercury in that rotor gets going full speed, again, the rotors, the three rotors underneath the craft. Camden will scroll when he gets back, but that's why I wanted those images there. And apparently this is what a viewing ship is, because again, there's those little, windows, if you want to call them, to be able to see. Now, when they took off, Chaco said he felt a very great force. And Rama told him not to worry. They stopped and hovered for a while over an old road that led to the Panamericana Highway near a little town not too far from the city of Chiclayo. There, they unloaded the Volkswagen, though they did not get out of the ship. Rama said they would leave it there for an hour or two. Later, she and Chaco would come back in a Vimana, which is a small craft for 2 or 3 people. They ascended again, but at a lesser speed, flying on over the Andes Mountains again at a great altitude. He could see some commercial jetliners far below them, a tiny speck of light when they reflected the sun. Descending gradually at a distance, he could see a big body of water. Rama said it was Lake Titicaca, and that they were going down into it. Chaco opened his eye wide as he saw the lake approaching, expecting crash or at least a marked change going from one density to another. This is when it gets interesting, guys. I'm going to stop reading this in a second. But it was smooth, and there was nothing resembling a crash when they hit the water. There was another change in density, and suddenly they were up in the air flying through the clouds. He saw some ice-covered mountains in the distance and recognized them as the ice peaks 25 miles from the Huancayo. He could see the Montado Valley with its river running in the center of it and the scenery all around. So think about it like this, guys, before we go on. They go down into the water, no splash or anything. There have been cases where the UFOs do create a splash, but again, being inside the craft, you don't experience a splash. However, there have been other cases where there isn't even a splash. Because again, if the EMF field created around the craft transcends that of space, time, and all other elements, fire, water, air, you name it, if there's a particular mode or method within the craft of the machine or the mechanism,
it would be moving matter around it, so it wouldn't make a splash.
You couldn't. You can go through. The craft could go through rock, and it wouldn't. And Lua Elizondo has claimed that during his time at ATIP, which stands for Advanced Aerospace Threat Identification Program, he was actually, again, he didn't say specifically, so I don't want to put words in his mouth, especially because honestly, I want to get him on the show too. But he basically said that he was given mathematics and and a bunch of equations, if you will, that essentially if mass were to be converted in a negative fashion or inverted, if you will, you can cut through walls and cut through walls and rocks like a knife spreading butter, so to speak. So take a look at this. Rama flew the Vimana to Chiclayo, where it was left in hiding behind some sand hills, and they walked to where the car was left earlier. Chaco had actually flown in two different kinds of UFOs, and he considered this an experience of a lifetime. As they walked to the car, Rama repeated her earlier suggestion that Chaco write all this down for later. Now she added, the purpose of writing this down is not for the reporting of UFOs. From now on, you and I and my friends from other worlds are going to see a lot of each other. You will be getting in and out of spacecraft. You'll see motherships and more of our surface bases. Don't bother writing about that because much of that has been written already. Besides, you yourself said that nobody would believe it anyways. What I'd like you to do is write about our conversations and hope that those few who choose to believe you do so out of conviction. After they have corroborated it with the same reading suggestions we are going to give, also choose to accept that some people, human beings from other planets, are already here. That is the purpose of the message. End quote. Now, interestingly enough, it says here, this race type mentioned here is only one of several working in complete harmony with the humans from the Pleiades, who, true to their word, continue to return. Now, before I go on, I just want to say here, when Rama mentioned to Chaco allegedly that, again, don't bother writing about, don't bother writing about that.
Out, yeah.
Right. Right here. And hope that those few who choose to believe you do so out of conviction. I find this quite significant. Could you actually, Camden, go back to just put some images up for the audience to look at while I'm doing a little rant? Perfect. Thank you. I find this quite significant because, again, the concept of belief, and I'm not trying to be overly esoteric or philosophical or corny or anything like this. The reason I say the concept of belief is because ultimately, when we take a step back and we look at the idea through whether it's science, quantum physics, you name it, that warrants us to think that the manifestation of a thought accumulates into an idea that would come to fruition based on your perception, you are then designing it and you are the creator of that idea. Now, the reason I say this is because when Rama said to Chaco, just hope that your friends believe you. That's basically what she said. Just hope that they believe you. They could easily just, prove it to everybody, but that's not the point. The point is to create that individual spiritualistic form of evolution that, again, apparently has lagged relative to our technological nuts and bolts advancement. So the reason I say this is because, again, the problem with belief and the beautiful thing about belief is that it could either be entirely based on something you are perceiving or it could not be. The reason it could not be is because it then leads to things like, again, you making things up, right? Just blatantly lying and making things up. But the great thing is that if manifested in an appropriate form of intention, it could actually be used as a form of energy, if you want to call it that. And again, Dan Winter, for those that see on our Patreon, who came on for episode 1 of a fantastic lecture series that we're just getting started with, mentioned as well too. Intention. I know this sounds strange, but intention, mental intention, tends to create that overall manifestation of your perceptive reality, which you then see relative to you. And so if you were to describe that in a way to others, they may have to see it in different ways. And I understand why it's not as simple as just landing a ship in the middle of, New York City and everyone, because too much havoc, too many people would question. Again, it's a whole thing, right? So
I mean, the same way that there's people that would realize these truths that, like, our channel talks about, there'd be people of the conspiracy community that are like, no, that's obviously fake. They would never just land right in the middle of New York. That's CGI. Or like, people would not believe it and believe it. You know what I mean? Yeah, you're right.
Well, you're exactly right. Well, it's like what Christopher Mellon said on Joe Rogan a handful of months ago. Joe Rogan said, have you seen any of these craft, or have you even interacted with any of these beings? And Christopher Mellon goes, if I have, I wouldn't be allowed to say because of my security clearances. And if I was allowed to say, nobody would believe me anyways.
Right.
So it's like, again, it's like, where do you win? Right. Yep. So let's jump to not the last tab, if that's cool. The mark of the beast. Again, like I said, folks, we're going to bring this full circle. And again, I bring up, we put George Soros in the title because we wanted to, again, give a prime example of an individual that would be pushing a lot of this. We've seen lately now the recent New York Post articles and all that showing he funded a lot of the, BLM, Antifa, all that. I'm not trying to make this political. What I'm trying to say is, again, this is he is a mechanism or tool for a more malevolent set of extraterrestrials that are attempting to, again, divide, suppress, and not allow people like you and I, or rather divert and distract people like you and I from looking at things like this. They would much rather right now you and I go and we talk about the nukes that might go off between Russia and the US, or the bill in Congress that didn't pass that we almost got the just a bunch. I hate to say, I don't want to say it like this, but it's a bunch of nonsense. I hate to say that it is, but it is. So let's go to brother.
Purposefully nonsense. It's made to inflict emotional reaction. It's so blatantly like stupid play acting today because they want us to get mad about it. They do. They really do.
Right.
Where do you want me to jump to?
Final tab, if that's cool.
Okay.
Mark of the beast. Perfect. Now, I got to be careful with reading certain parts here because, again, we'll see here, making the choice to side with or against the alien rulership. Now, we are presuming here, folks, that this has to do with the Saturn moon matrix type complex of suppression of the the Orion Draco Greys that are working for the Dracos that are working for the Alpha Draconians, or I think it's Draconians working for the either or. Now, I did want to say as well, too, quite interestingly, that well, we'll see. Actually, hold on a second. I'll bring that up shortly because, yeah. Okay. So we'll notice here, making the choice to side with or against the alien rulership. Now, again, we also have to be vigilant that some of these Pleiadians could not have been Pleiadians. Maybe there was some shape-shifting attempt at, deception going on. But this awareness, now awareness means, again, a form of energy, esoteric messaging, if you will. Now, indicates that the concern entities need to hold is for the welfare of others as well as for their own soul growth. It indicates that if you're in a situation which your soul growth is of highest priority, then of course, without question, you will automatically choose to follow your own integrity regardless of cost. If you are in a situation in which the welfare of those whom you love depends on your compromising your soul growth integrity, you will experience a dilemma. However, this awareness suggests, however, that in every situation, if your intentions are of the highest, there will come a time of decision that will be based largely on all your deepest and most inner feelings, love, duty, responsibility, desire, all of that, which again, science corroborates using that of entropic, sort of like the film Tenet, the entropy of a certain object, if you will. And on Patreon, we just put out a Let's Get Banned, which will be probably out in 2-3 weeks from now. And I think it really adds to that as well, too. Now, look at this. If, however, you act out of fear or greed or self-interest, the choice will invariably be the wrong choice. This awareness indicates that it is true. Everyone needs to go through moments in their lives where they need to make choices. It is possible for entities to forestall these choices by being prepared ahead of time, by circumventing the situation that would require the choice, or by seeing ahead, taking steps so that the choice is not as extreme in its nature, so that a choice made does not carry such consequences, end quote. We can substantiate this, not substantiate rather, but we can add to this because when we look, for example, folks, at the sort of soul cycle, if any of you, not saying you have to believe it, but, ideologically subscribe to it, the soul cycle, which they say is, going into the light after your physical body passes. Apparently, you're not supposed to go into the light. This is an extraterrestrial soul trap, if you will. Apparently, the reincarnation of previous lives is due to that soul light trap. I'm not saying that is always the case. I'm just saying that that would also imply that the Akashic records relative to Earth events would be artificially created or manifested in a certain system within a certain holographic system, really, right? Now, again, we've seen that the example I gave of Rama and Chaco in the previous tab there that we were looking at shows that the tech is there to do that, right? Basic illusions, all these things, right? So now let's see here. Hold on. And also, one of the great things about this is perception. Not saying any action is good nor bad, which is why a lot of people say, how come, people like Epstein or George Soros get away with things for so long? They don't view it as bad. They create that aura of energy around them as they know it's ultimately not good, but that perception of self-indulgence energetically.
They've been raised in this role. I mean, does Elon Musk think creating the Neuralink is bad? Does he think that harming these pigs is a bad thing? Does he think that, I mean, he, in his perspective, is really probably only helping humanity. Bill Gates even probably thinks he is doing the best thing for humanity. Legitimately. He really does, I bet. But it's, I don't know. It's strange. It's
No,
justification.
I couldn't agree more. So we'll see here. If you accept the alien mark of the beast, now I'm not saying I know what the mark of the beast is, but you see here this next headline below: once injected into the body, the identity chip cannot be removed. So let's go one step at a time here. There are many who believe that if they accept the brand or mark of the beast, which is essentially an alien brand marking their property, as humans brand cattle to mark ownership of the cattle, that they will lose their control of their soul. This awareness indicates that in regard to the alien factor, this could well occur since the aliens have the ability to sever souls from the individuals and to make clones using souls or parts of the soul of individuals. Again, Carla Turner brought this up as well. And also, the aliens may in their agenda promote the concept of rapture, in which they pick up individuals and take them to, this particularly referring to the Dracos, their own home planet to be used for breeding and husbandry for livestock for food for their populations. The missing children and all that, not saying they all go underground. I'm sure there's, the national parks of people being abducted, the whole thing, not just children, but in general. This awareness indicates, by the way, I just want to do, for the sake of the stream, a quick little plug. If any of you guys here are interested in what we have to say and you've been following for a while and you haven't yet signed up to the Patreon, I can assure you, not even trying to brag, but those that have signed up will tell you the stuff that we put on the Patreon dwarfs what we do here. I just want
Lucky Luciano. I'm not sure how to say his name. I'm not good at that pronunciation.
Yeah,
But
that's how
he
you say it,
said at
yeah.
the beginning, he said, if it, like, guys, you've got to sign up for this Patreon. The work that they have on there is nothing
Thank
next
you,
to any
man.
of this. It was I really
You.
liked it a lot. It was a good. It was a
Thank
good
you, Luch.
comment.
I appreciate that. And of course, the only reason why we bring this up, guys, is because we don't put ads on here. We don't monetize. We don't want to put stuff out we wouldn't want to watch ourselves. So it's, again, our only source of keeping this going. But let's thank you to those that have continued to always support. But let's go on. Um, let's take a look here. Once injected into the body, the identity chip cannot be removed. Sorry, hold on one second. If these are not escapable, it is important to keep in mind that your soul is your soul. And even when it is severed and taken into a clone, you still possess your soul, even though in another body. This is interesting. Once injected into the
Really?
body, well, again, this is just one
Well, yeah, it's a
form of, yeah,
perspective, but that's not a perspective that I've heard anyone justify before. Interesting.
right, right.
Keep going.
So we'll see here. This awareness wishes to explain that those who have the mark forced upon them, such as children or entities who are incapable of resisting the mark because of force, will not experience that which is the separation of the soul. This awareness indicates it is the entity who willingly takes the mark that is in danger of losing, or the control of his or her soul. The awareness indicates that it is to be understood that the so-called mark is not as harmless as once was thought to be in terms of its physical nature. It's not simply a laser mark or a mark that can be read by a laser, and it is not simply a barcode neither. It will be a chip that will be embedded in the hand or the forehead, and it will operate from the heat from the body. It will have lithium batteries that are heated by the body and thus recharged by the heat, so that they are intended to be more or less indefinitely charged. Now, I also want to keep in mind that things could have evolved since the time in which this was, mentioned. So again,
Do you know when this website was even made? Do you know
uh,
when?
we'll see here. This awareness indicates, of course, there will be entities who will try to take these chips out, but in the process of trying to extract such chips, they will also damage the chips and cause the same of toxic release. So there will
Yeah,
be many who will
someone
suffer.
mentioned a patent that they say correlates this very heavily. We'll finish this. I'll pull it up on the
Sure,
side. Yeah,
sure. Sounds. You can actually, brother, while I'm reading, you can pull it
that's what
up
I'm
and
gonna
all
do.
that.
Yeah, that's what I'm gonna do.
Um, Hold on. This awareness has discussed this briefly in an earlier reading, that those who do not take the chip are likely to become outcasts in society, much like the untouchables in India, but this will be far better than accepting the chip and the consequences spiritually and physically. One little point I wanted to note here is that it says, could it be that due to the entrance of the Earth into the photon belt, which changes the atmospheric conditions and frequencies, the lithium will start to leak out of the chips? It's very possible. It's very possible. So
I mean, that
we'll
would
see.
make sense, and that literally would kill you. Yes.
Well, right. Now, this is presuming that there hasn't been some type of evolutionary angle on their end, and that, again, what's being, I'm not trying to presume, but the beep boop out there, so to speak, is what's being referred to here, or at least in a sort of vague implicatory sense. But we see here, reject the chip, and you will lose all worldly possessions. This awareness indicates, of course, this will mean that many entities will lose their worldly possessions if they do not accept and take the chip. It is a choice that entities will be required to make at some point. It is a part of the New World Order programming and planned population control. This awareness indicates that many entities who have lived through the Nazi Germany scenario will recognize similarities as these programs are brought down upon the masses, and they will not go for the scenario as easily as those who do not know what is occurring or do not wish to challenge the powers that would impose a totalitarian state upon its people. I have a quick little side note, guys. I gotta be careful here with what I'm saying, but I have a family friend, former KGB. This person was asked on what they thought of what's going on in the world today, and they said it's the coercion angle of it is way worse than anything that this person saw during the Soviet Union. So take that as you will. Hold on. It is very likely that they will be told at a time when there is an economic crisis that, quote, in order to receive some government dole, such as a debit amount in your bank account or anything like this, you will be allowed a certain amount of credit from the government if you receive this chip in your hand, which will allow them to keep track of your economic and social standing. Again, the awareness indicates that already this has been attempted in New York City. Members will know, again, in New York City, for crying out loud, whereby entities were paid $25 to be involved in an experiment whereby they would receive this chip placed in their hand. It is placed in their hand, much likened unto a Maxine needle. I gotta say, I can't even say the word without worrying about being taken down. Christ, it is so small it can be injected. Yeah, I know.
Sorry,
It's
I'm just
yeah,
laughing. I'm laughing at the skirting because it's you have to. You're right, but it's just so
yeah, yeah.
funny.
No, absolutely. Reason for implanting children will be used by officials. This awareness indicates that there are also frequently situations whereby agencies will speak of the need to protect your children from abductions and so forth, and there will be the offer to give these children some kind of a chip that will make them so that they can be found regardless of where they are. These chips are so that no matter where an entity is, no matter where an animal is, that such chip, they can be found in a matter of hours. I have something quite interesting to point out here. Now, also, by the way, actually, before I do that, no, first, let me say this. I feel like what's being said here may not be what we're
Oh,
seeing
that's
right
what they
now.
meant. Okay, I know what they're. I know what patent they were talking about. I thought so.
Oh,
All right,
okay,
keep
cool.
going. Keep
I
going.
have
Sorry.
I do have a little bit of a no, no worries. I have a bit of a thought-provoking theory for the audience here, and even for those listening or watching later on. My thought is this, guys. What if, again, this is just a what if. What we're seeing around the world right now is simply a preliminary test, so to speak, for again, some type of Project Bluebeam apparatus where they admit the existence of ETs, but then, as it says here, this awareness says, in order to prevent you from being abducted and da da da, protect yourself, stick around with the humans. You know what I mean? That whole concept there. Now, we'll see here that again, this awareness indicates that these chips will contain total information about a person. But by the way, guys, it goes even deeper. So just hold on. From childhood up to present, and continue to add to that information as the entity lives from day to day, purchasing magazines, reading material, food, or receiving health treatments, medications, etc. All of this will go into the chip as an entity moves in and out of business transactions at stores, health clinics, or libraries, bookstores, record or music shops, or whatever. All of the information gathered. Now, this paragraph here, right before the government agencies already using Beast system, this last paragraph here is significant, especially for the members on Patreon. You'll know exactly what I'm talking about here. All of the information gathered just goes to show you how people like Robert Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell's father, and George Soros and all the others, it's all intertwined. All of the information gathered will be readable from there to any office seeking to research the entity, meaning you or I. This awareness indicates there is already in place a system for database information on almost every entity. This is a software program that is used around the world by most countries in their computers. The system is known as PROMIS. PROMIS. That is the
Yep.
same software that the Mossad stole, thanks to Robert Maxwell, and sold to the highest bidder. Promise, then, if we were to speed it up to today's day and age, is now the Pegasus alleged, NSO. That's the updated version of it, so to speak. But Promise was allegedly also the foundational code and piece of software and system used in that was described in the Alien War Plans Paul Benowitz documents, Project Beta. Again, every human or alien coming and going, having to have this chip. Not only that, but if we go back to, say, an hour ago when we were reading about Gary McKinnon, non-terrestrial officers would make sense why you'd have to have some kind of chip. Again, all of this being tested during the secret space program. I'm not saying this is factual, folks. I'm just saying it's thought provoking for you guys. I know you guys like to hear some of my, proposals and all that. So all of that preparation as being a test before the real thing has even begun, and then you do a preliminary test, which is what we were experiencing right now. I'm not saying that's what it is. I'm
I
just
mean,
saying
it's
it
a
makes you think.
preliminary test all the way back to, I think, Marius. Yeah, Marius said it in the chat. These chips that we're speaking on, they're already in our dogs and cats, right? You know what I
Right?
mean?
Yeah. No, absolutely, absolutely. But I just wanted to say, probably going to wrap it up at this
Yeah,
point.
we're getting close. This was what they were talking about. So I remember this. It's basically this
Yes,
is more of that blockchain like hesitancy that I have. It's basically a patent tied to blockchain. Um,
right.
it may be provided mining process of cryptocurrency. A server may provide a task device which is sensor
Yeah,
like literally it's a reward. It's a gamification of anything. They can say you have to do 5 hours of community service to have food this week. They can say like all of those things. This is another explanation of it. Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation came to us and said, "Hey, we have a problem. We don't know who's vict." So like it,
you know,
they have this justification, this moral like high ground that they play on when they really it's just so
I
it seems
know
transparent
what
to
you're.
us. It seems transparent to us.
I
Because
know you're absolutely right. I couldn't agree more. I mean, not only that, but we also see at the bottom of that other page. You don't have to skip back to it. It
okay.
just sorry, at the top it says another reason to create mass unemployment, collapsing, world currencies in developing countries, or ones that are just underdeveloped, or first very powerful nations, if you will. I hate to use that term, developed,
Yeah.
third world. I don't like that, but
No, right.
ultimately here again, whether it's, I was just reading through some of the comments, whether it's Elon Musk, whether it's with Starlink, whether it's almost every angle of this has been covered by some type of chip, nano chip. I mean, there's no lack of chips. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
So I mean, at this point in time, again, it's not for me to say, and for everyone to decide for themselves. But
Aaron
did you
Atkins
want to add anything?
asks. Aaron
Yeah.
Atkins asks, so why are vaccines such a focus when prevention should be? Well, I don't think vaccines are the focus. I think that's one of them. They've got these scared people very focused on vaccines. We have the digitally native children running around very excited on NFTs and blockchain based things. They, for lack of a better explanation, too, the QAnon devout are very excited about blockchain because they're like the NSA has all the blockchain. They can prove all the fraud. They've got everyone in all different angles excited about blockchain. They
Right.
also have everyone excited about the tech of smart cities, which will have to just also be based on blockchain. There's
Yeah.
so many different ways that it's not just crypto. It's not just vaccine passports. It is a total control mechanism just in case they need to. The same, I mean,
I
yeah.
Yeah. No, I truly could not agree more. Um, yeah, no,
It
it's
was created in hidden hand. Yes.
yeah, yeah, no,
I'll just
it's
read some of the comments. Y'all are all right. Like, you're absolutely right.
no, 1 trillion% absolutely. Um, so yeah, I'm thinking we wrap it up at this point, only because it's
Oh,
we're
wait.
coming
We
up.
have one question
Oh,
we have
sure.
to ask. I pinned it,
Sure.
and I think that he's still here. I hope.
Oh, yeah, yeah.
Joffrey Lane, longtime
Yep.
participant. I have a question for you both. If space is real and flat Earth, then how are they getting off Earth going into space? If there's a barrier dome, please explain. Thank you. I'll let you answer first. I have thoughts too.
Sure. I got a few different angles of that, Jeffrey. I appreciate the question. I would say first and foremost, oh, Nils, thank you, brother. I would say first and foremost, with respects to that, their craft are first. Okay. I think that the craft in which we have right now, when I say we, I mean humans, I think is very advanced, but at the same time, not as advanced as a lot of these other species. with that being said, I think if there is a dome or firmament in place, if you want to call it that, which in the next stream we'll look at a video sent to us by a good friend and member of the show, Steve, brother. Thank you if you're still watching. Um, I think those EMF fields, again, if it voids space and time, it voids everything. So just like when people say, how did these craft come to and from the get through the Van Allen belt? Well, it wouldn't mean, part of my English, it wouldn't mean jack shit if that EMF field creates that. Now, I believe there's different kinds of EMF fields. And at the same time, I think that, again, I'm not saying that this dome is lowered every time these craft come and go just because there's so many of them. I think if there is a dome, which I believe there is in many different regards, it's not nearly as advanced as these alien craft coming in. Because again,
Right.
there's always an insurance to prevail a type of system, a hierarchy system that even though it's our planet on the surface, even though that's up to debate, it's our stuff is still weaker than theirs. That would be my take. But
I hear that. I like that one too. I'm sort of a Gnostic type of person. I don't know. I definitely don't know any answer with certainty. My perspective that resonates most with me is space is mostly as they tell us it is in a, I mean, this giant torus black hole in the center. It loops around itself. It is plasma contained, though it is not in a vacuum. I think that we're missing a large piece of that in physics. The electric universe type of thing is really really real. I if it's a firmament, then we have to say that these UFOs, I would say they're maybe interdimensional. The same way we talked about that bread loaf. Everything's in the firmament, but
right.
those are the things that go between slices of bread in the same loaf. We're just not beings that can, so to speak. Those are my perspectives on any of those things. I don't think flat Earth is real in any way. I think if it was a lie of a shape, it would be a like golf ball divot. It would be a toilet bowl Earth, not flat. That just it doesn't work in the math.
I fully agree.
But I mean, those are my perspectives that I've resonated with on that question.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I just wanted to let everybody know that usually we sit the last 20, 30 minutes, we hang out with you guys, we take questions, the whole thing. But just because it's a weekday and depending where
Totally.
you are in the world, it's getting real late, if not early, depending where you are. So
Yeah.
I wanted to thank everybody so much for coming. Well, we wanted to thank everyone so much for coming out, and we'll probably do another stream. Nothing for certain, but I'd like to do another one this weekend for the fun of it. Why not?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
And yeah, we'll catch all you guys later on. So thank you so much, everybody.
Nighty night, everyone.